here. Starting with the proposed budget for 2019, we'll start with the cemetery. Diana?
Okay, the cemetery, there's really no changes to that. The budget is $3,285. There's, $500 for repairs and maintenance in case they need new culverts or whatnot. But
Sure.
I spoke to Trent and I agreed this will work.
Okay. Any questions? Okay. Move on to community development. What exactly? Okay, advertising, miscellaneous, Mesabi Trail.
Yep, you can see the advertising expense is $440, and what that is made up of is the volunteer ad, we always do the MIB calendar with all of our meeting listings and advertising, and the visitor's guide, and the fair promotion, so. That's that, and the Mesabi Trail expenses, that is the porta potties and then the mowing, they charge us for mowing it. It's usually about twice a year they.
Go out and do it, right?
The trail?
Well,
The trail,
The Mesabi Trail on the
On the
side, the bike
signs,
path.
they charge us to do it?
Yeah,
They
we have to
charge our
maintain the
2
Buhl
miles,
portion of
whatever
it.
our portion, but every town has to do their own.
Yes.
Their trail, we got,
But we have say-so whether we want to let it be used for different things or how we want to have it managed too, so.
Yep. So that budget is $1,785 total.
Okay, any questions? Okay, we'll move on to Martin Hughes School.
The school budget is $121,275, a little less than this year for 2018. The majority of the costs are heating, electricity, water, sewer, gas, it's the utilities. Some repairs and maintenance. Nothing really different from this year.
My question, Diana, is that if we budgeted 130,000 last year and there's still 72,000 left,
Part of that budget for
There is a-
2018 was to, if it sells, we have to pay the realtor, the 7,000, and then we also budgeted, I believe 16,000 to repair the small roof, the gym roof, the small. We had that in the budget for 2018 in case
right?
anybody, that might have been a condition of a sale or something.
Right.
Yeah, we didn't do
But we
that.
still have that money there,
Yeah, yeah, for 2018.
so we could use some of that money to lower what we need to carry over for next year, do you think?
Well, if we don't use that money, it just goes into the general fund.
Right,
It just increases the
Right.
fund balance.
and I hate to see us overtax the people more than we would
But
have
we
to.
didn't increase our levy at all this year.
Right. Right. But it's always nice if we could decrease it, whatever.
That would be nice.
Yeah. This would be another area that I think we could look at. This and law enforcement are the two areas where I think we have a little bit of wiggle room.
Yeah, it's definitely something to look at.
Okay. Any other questions?
Well, that's just advertising expense if we sold it, that's gonna be coming out of whatever that sale price.
It would be an expense for us for 2019, that's why it's in the budget.
Oh, but it would
Because we
be
would
But we would get.
rolled it back.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Okay. We'll move on to unallocated expenditures.
The unallocated, majority of it is insurance. Retiree insurance, general liability insurance. So,
Is this all related to the retired?
the retiree insurance expense, that's $40,730. That's all the retirees.
Okay, yeah,
And, with the going up
Liability
17.5%,
insurance, okay.
plus we have an additional retiree on there as well.
sure. Okay. All right. So that increases by 5,600, something like that, 5,700 for the year? Okay. Retirement pension, unallocated,
This 4,000 is part of the union contract where.
we put in,
for the.
gotta beef up for,
Retirement fund.
right? All right. Bonds,
Our debt, going into 2019, we only have this one now. The other one, this was Fund 307 for Juan List 2018. It's paid off at the end of 2018, so now we only have this one left. And so our payment is 15, we have our interest of 1,500, and then fees for the fiscal agent and administrative fees that they charge us.
okay. All right. Move on to fire and ambulance?
Yep.
Was there, okay,
I moved on to
Okay.
the Capital Fire Department.
okay,
The 9,600 in there, that is a new item, but that's from the lease payments from next one.
Right.
That then the council would allocate to the designated fund for the fire department.
okay. Street department,
Every year we try to put money away to.
this is all capital for,
Yeah, this is all the capital fund to put away for new equipment as needed. So this year or next year, for 2019, we're planning on 15,000.
which is what we've been doing, yeah.
A street sweeper is what, 6,000 a year?
Yes.
We made a down payment and then we bonded for
Right,
six, six, and six, yeah.
Yeah, so for 3 years.
Yeah.
okay. Unallocated expenditures,
This is, again, a capital one. We do receive mining effects monies, and so you'll see this 38,700 on the revenue end, and also here on the expenditure end. And a portion of this money does have to be used for not just our community, but surrounding communities as well. So usually, I mean, in the past, we've used it for roads and that everybody.
like out at the beach where everybody can come into town and use it,
Well, we
yeah.
used it at the or at senior center. I mean, I put in new lights one time. We used it at the curling club for maybe lights there too,
Yep.
so.
Senior center too, I think we've done things, and even at the library, because they are used by multiple communities, which is
Exactly.
good. Okay,
Well, that,
Aren't we, I think, aren't we getting a little more now for next year?
well, we did,
We did, we got a few thousand more.
$2,400 from last year.
all right,
That would be a good line item to pull the capital for the senior center, because that's one of the key things is like the library and the senior center is a community.
Right.
Kenny, Buhl, Great Scott.
right,
So instead of budgeting for capital like at the senior center, which we had $5,000, we should dedicate this mining effects money that way instead, then we can lower our budget on some of the other items.
Definitely.
can look at it. All right, I'll move on to the library
On
fund.
the library, the state tells us, we have to put aside for the library, and that has not changed in, I think, 6 years, so it's still, a little over 71,000. And I believe the library board met and came up with
Right,
these line items, so.
right,
So they have 57,977 for their library, basically operating salaries and insurance and things like that. And then for their building, they have 14,000, so it's a total of the $71,977 that we are required to give them.
keeps us in the Arrowhead system. Any questions? Okay, library building,
Yeah, that's 14,000, and it's basically the utilities, the phones, 5,000 for maintenance, for they need electrical work or whatever, just for building maintenance and
Heat.
repairs. Heat, repair, yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah. Okay, that's it. Thank you, Diana. Good job,
Thank you.
as always. We'll move on for reports from department heads. Trent can't wait to talk to us.
Well, like you mentioned about heat with the library just now, I'm sure you guys know, we've been having trouble with one of the furnaces, and we had someone come in and take a look at it, and it's a control module, it's on order. We're overnighting it so we can get it in. We're able to temporarily have it running right now on what it has, but it takes a little TLC to keep it going, but
Yeah.
we wanna get it good before Thanksgiving, yeah, before the long weekend.
Thank you.
Well, you can see we got Christmas lights up. You'll notice that some of them aren't working properly. There are some wiring issues that I'm working around. I got a few that I got working properly, but
My grandkids were concerned.
it's just something with the new LED fixtures that were put up, and I've been in contact with the company, and they said I did it right. I know I did do it right, so
Oh,
trying to figure that out. There's
Mountain Iron has the same thing, maybe just give
Yeah,
them,
so I'll have to look at, because I don't know, believe the company I bought, their technical support isn't the best. So it's been a little bit of a.
but I see Mountain Iron on the highway there, have the LEDs and the fixtures.
Yeah. So if they were all controlled like the ones out here where I had problems, they're controlled by the same photocell, my headache would be a lot smaller right now, but. So, still working on it. Hopefully I have it by Christmas.
Do you remember what we paid for them? Do we have any extras or no?
What's that?
Oh, then I have to order, because I've used the last one recently. They're $225 a piece.
There's no warranty on them either, or?
Oh, no, they still work. It's just how they function. They don't have the best directions for, the outlet is the problem. So I'm working around that. So.
Is that what was causing the strobe light or the?
Yeah, it was the outlet, and so that's why some of them are unplugged right now. Well, the ones that were strobing, in the strobe action, those are fixed now, those, just a couple other ones now. And actually, the other problems might be actual underground wire issues, so I don't know if I'll be able to fix those during the winter here. I'll have to maybe think about actually putting in new wires, because over the years I know they've had problems.
are you set up with sanding for the winter?
Yep, we were gonna go out this morning, but it just kept snowing, so tomorrow we'll be out.
Yeah.
Get the sidewalks opened up and everything, get everything looking good for the holiday.
Sounds good. Sounds like we shouldn't be getting snow over the holiday. Maybe you'll be able
I hope
to
not.
enjoy it. That-
That's it.
Okay, thanks, Trent. Fire and ambulance? Okay, engineering, John, you just here, okay. Attorney,
Just agenda there.
okay. Long-range planning and zoning,
Well, when's our next meeting?
It's quarterly, so it would be the January.
so, okay. Recreation board? Did you guys meet and talk about applicants at all yet?
The,
Applications are due this coming Monday.
so we didn't have a
okay.
meeting, because we figured we'll wait till after we get all the applicants. And
Sure.
we'll have a meeting, like, beginning of, or the end of the month here or something, or beginning of.
Yeah, after
January.
Thanksgiving.
So,
Okay. Library board, you've got the minutes from the 2 meetings in your packet. Beta, end of the month,
The only thing, I had talked to the representative from Ziegler about the easement and, you know, kind of what BETA was looking for, the $1,500 a year plus allowing KGM, KGM access to that haul road. She seemed, fine with it. So
Okay.
they should be getting something back to me in the next week or so to bring before VITA, so.
So them trucks coming through town?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Go straight across.
Yep. Very good,
Yeah.
okay. Sheriffs, we'll get a report next meeting. Clerk?
The only things I really have, just note the additional information from Dave Berg that's at your table, and also a month and a half ago, I had sent a letter on behalf of the city to the Chisholm Police Chief regarding them being able to process our parking tickets to kind of clean up. I know both Diana and I have gotten numerous complaints weekly about trailers or cars that haven't moved, but Chief Matter did present that to the council, and they directed their attorney to get in touch with Mr. Carney to kind of develop an agreement, so that should be coming up
Very good.
I'll see.
at some point.
I'll see Mr. Lindsay tomorrow at court, so.
Okay,
follow
perfect.
up on that.
Sounds good.
Yeah, we're just looking for somebody to process. They,
Yep,
I
Good.
passed Chisholm's council unanimously.
good.
yeah, great.
All right. And Central Sanitary Sewer District,
We had a meeting Monday, last Monday?
Yeah,
Actually, we're gonna get a new board member because of the death of
yeah, Herb Sellers died. He was a Great Scott Township
right,
rep.
right.
So Herb has been there since day one. Now, 10 years later, he's gonna have to replace him, so.
Does it have to be somebody from Great Scott Township then? Is that what they'll
Well,
look for?
Yeah, the Great Scott will,
Okay,
that's their board will appoint
Okay.
somebody.
And then, I don't know if you want the flows, but we had, October was over 5 million gallons in flow for the month. It was a daily average of 174,000.
is that pretty par, or are we high? Where are we at with that?
Yeah, that's high.
Yeah?
Um,
Did we have a lot of water
The,
incidences during that month?
Yeah,
it
it's
rained a
rain.
lot.
Okay,
That's Trent, he just went down the cemetery a
yeah.
couple days ago and the ground is wet.
Lots of water.
In August, was 93,000, so we went from 93,000. And then in September was 119, and then October was 174,000, so. Chisholm actually finished up with their Lake Street project, so they're thinking that they're gonna be good on there.
Doing better, yeah.
I&I.
Yeah, because they're upgrading underground
Yep,
and it's showing in Chisholm. And we're in a process.
good. That's good. All right, council additions to the agenda. I don't think we have any tonight. Citizens Forum, I don't think we have any tonight. Consent agenda minutes,
I'll make a motion to approve the regular minutes of November 5th and November, a special meeting of November 13th.
Support.
any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Claims,
I'll make a motion that we pay the claims of $85,766.12. Payroll number 23.
Support.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. All right, first on our agenda is our rate study, and we have Mr. Berg here with us tonight. Thank you for coming.
Yes, well, that there wasn't as much snow as it could have been.
Yes.
On my drive up, so, and my drive back.
Where are you driving from?
I'm from the Twin Cities.
Oh, boy,
Yeah,
that's
so
quite a drive.
You're going back tonight?
I am. I
Well,
do that all the time, anyway. We'll talk about my mental health later. So yes, I'm Dave Berg. I'm a one-man consulting firm out of the Twin Cities. I was with a firm for 25 years, and I've been on my own for about 6 years now. And I've been working as a consulting engineer, predominantly doing rate work for over 30 years. I've worked for a lot of communities in Minnesota and Iowa and elsewhere. And just so you can be jealous, I was actually in Hawaii for a week for work last week, so.
Huh?
I was actually doing a training program for the Hawaii Public Utilities Commission, so that wasn't too tough to do.
You kinda get around.
I do get around, yes. I've worked in about 40 states,
Oh, boy.
so. So I have undertaken a look at your four utilities, and you have several handouts. Let's start with, I know the print is kind of small, but there's one that it looks like this, and it has Exhibit A in the upper right corner.
All right.
This is basically looking at your four utilities, electric, water, sewer, and refuse or garbage. And what this represents is, and of course you were mentioning with regard to the sewer and the flows and the inflows, and I think part of the reason why you've taken this opportunity is because you're looking at the potential for spending a lot of money on your water and wastewater facilities, and have about a $5.6 million capital potential for water and wastewater. And you kind of need to get your rates in shape. One, I know you want to apply for some grant money, and they kind of require that your rates, plus two, you just can only sort of bleed on the bottom line for so long.
Right?
So, the Exhibit A, what we're looking at here is, this is under the assumption of getting a $1 million grant towards those capital improvements. Now, within these projections, there are no changes in your existing retail rates for all four of the utilities.
Okay.
There is in your expenses, however, there are, projections going forward in the expenses, and I actually did meet with a representative from Minnesota Power and also a representative from the sewer district relative to kind of how things were looking going forward. So, you can see basically the other thing is we haven't projected any growth in any of the sales in any of the utilities, basically sort of status quo relative to the amount of electricity or water sold.
Right.
So you can basically see it's all sort of clumped together where you've got the four utilities where you essentially have about $1 million in annual revenue of the four utilities combined. And then there's the operating expenses of each of the utilities, and in particular, in electricity, the biggest is obviously the purchases for Minnesota Power. Likewise, in the sewer, the biggest is the bill that you're paying to the sewer district, and in refuse, the biggest bill is what you're paying to waste management. Whereas in water, and of course you folks are known for your water, and your expenses in water, relatively speaking, are relatively low, because you don't have to do a lot to treat your water. You've got just such good water to begin with, so it's basically sort of operating and maintenance expense of the local system. So, when it's all said and done, if you go to the bottom of this first page, you can see that we're projecting, well, in the 2018 projection is an overall operating income loss of about $85,000. When I got here this afternoon, we took a look and sort of eyeballing the end of 2018, we think it will be just slightly better, but not a lot. So that this projection of 2018 end of year result is pretty close to where we think it's actually going to end up.
Okay.
And you can see then that just grows over time, because essentially we have no growth in revenue, but we have growth in expenses. So the negative number just sort of continues to get a little bigger as we go forward. If you go then to the next page, there's just some non-operating income and expense. Now, if you look, the non-operating revenue and expense in the water and sewer lines, you notice that in 2019 and in 2020, those numbers get pretty big. Those represent the interest payments associated with whatever debt might need to be incurred relative to the big capital improvements. You'll notice the 2019 number is half as big as 2020. I went under the assumption of issuing the debt basically at the halfway point of next year. So 2019 would only have 6 months of interest, and then 2020 would have a full year of interest. And then you can see how the interest payment goes down, because just like a mortgage, every year there's a little more principal, a little less interest.
Sure.
Is that as if we didn't get any money from the USDA?
No, this is, this has got $1 million in grant assumed, money. And I'll show you in just a second where that factors in. Then there's a little bit of transfer in, transfer out, which isn't significant. But then you can basically see the change in net position, and obviously it's a sea of negative numbers. And they get pretty big, particularly in water. If you look at the change in net position as a percentage of revenue, you see water gets to where it's 85% in the red by 2020, when there's a full year of interest expense and so on associated with the new debt. You know, electric is, 13 growing to 18%, sewer is 40%, and then refuse is, on a percentage basis, is a little better, in the sort of high single-digit numbers there. In general, one way to think about it is, when you look at your cash reserves for the utilities as a whole, you have just under $1 million at the beginning of this year in cash reserves. So you more or less have about 1 year of operating revenue in cash reserves. What we're showing is that by the end of the study period, for all intents and purposes, it'll be zero. So basically, you can think in terms of 4 years, 2019, 20, 21, and 22, where we're depleting 1 year's worth of operating revenue in the reserves. So just sort of back of the envelope, that would say you need about a 25% increase in total revenues in order to keep your reserve levels flat, without having them decrease and also not sort of increase.
Right.
In basic rough terms. Now, when you look at the analysis I've got on the cash reserves, so there's the beginning of year, then you add, or in this case, subtract the net income or change in position, which comes from just above. Then you can see there's that existing debt payment that is now finished in 2018, so that number is zero going forward. Then I have the capital improvements, which I spread over 2 years, so that's about just a little over 5.6 million was the number that was in the report that I had relative to the projection. You can also see that I have plus available grant money. So I have $1 million, 500,000 in each of 2 years of essentially grant money coming into the process. Then that new debt proceeds, that calculates based on the capital improvements minus the money that you might get from a grant, minus a little bit of issuance expense. And so you end up with the proceeds of about 4.6 million. So if you look at the 4.6 million plus $1 million of grant money, that's the 5.6 million of capital improvements. Then you have to subtract off the new principal payments, which I have starting in 2020. And then you can add in the depreciation. Up in the operating expenses, depreciation is an operating expense, but it's non-cash. You don't write anybody a check for depreciation, so that can get added back in. So, essentially, like I said, we're looking at kind of an overall need of about 25% more money almost immediately in order to keep you kind of whole. And you can see that the next, which is a similar looking analysis, it's just that it's only a $250,000 grant instead of $1 million grant. The only place that matters is kind of the bottom line, because the interest expense is a little higher because the debt would need to be more. And then when you look at the cash flows, you can see that by the end of the period, we're about $100,000 further behind. And that's basically because of higher interest and higher principal payments associated with the bigger debt because of the lower grant. So this is just kind of the two endpoints based on my conversations with Ryan. He thought that you're probably going to get at least 250, and that $1 million might be kind of the ultimate best goal possible, if you will.
Right.
So I ran sort of those two
Yeah.
scenarios there. So before I go on, maybe I should ask if there's any questions about this portion, which basically is expressing the need.
Right.
So in all your reports here, you're not suggesting any rate increases?
No, so the reason that I'm not making a suggestion tonight is, one is that obviously the need is fairly significant, and I really wanted to get some input from you folks, because we have a few options and a few things to think about. And so I wanted to get some feedback from you, and then I told Ryan and Deanna that I would have them my recommendation by sometime next week. that would kind of get you where I think you need to be. But there's a couple of things that I'd like to talk about that I think you kind of need to understand, and I need to know how you feel about what those are gonna be relative when we start talking about the specific rates in each of the utilities.
Yeah, I did go through that. I mean, I've done it forever, but you had, like in your sheet, for electric, we charge 8 cents residential, and I proposing 9 cents in
Well, if you wanna
commercials.
hold those thoughts a little bit, because I wanna talk about each of the utilities and each of the rate structures.
Okay.
And so I'm gonna be very interested in what you have to say, but I've got some thoughts around the rate structures that I'd like to talk about them as we go.
All right.
Okay, so you have 4 additional sheets that show basically what I've done is for each of the utilities, I've shown what the existing rate is. I've also shown what kind of an average consumption is for the different kinds of customers in order to get a feel for what this might mean. So just in general, if you take an average electric plus an average water plus an average sewer plus an average garbage for a residential customer, it adds up to about $114. If, the average of each of the 4 utilities. So just to sort of have some context around the numbers, 25% of that would be an additional $28 a month, if that was where we were gonna end up. Just so that we have a feel for what 25% sounds like a lot. And on a
Right.
percentage basis, it certainly is.
Yep,
But it kind of depends on where you start. And one of the things is you've got really low rates.
right. We always have.
Yeah, you can't afford them anymore.
That's a shame. It's a
Yeah,
selling
well,
point for our town. Okay,
So you can feel better about the comparison to Hawaii. Their average electric rates are over 30 cents a kilowatt hour. Your residential rate is 8. So just to give you,
not so bad not living in Hawaii.
that's right. Now, as we look at your rate structure, so let's take residential first. One is that you have no monthly fixed customer charge. You're one of 2 utilities that I know of in Minnesota that don't have one.
For a minimum?
No, I'm talking about just yes, it would be a minimum, but a fixed charge. Like you have a fixed charge in water, you have a fixed charge in sewer. The reason that fixed charges are justified is that if, like, somebody builds a house, you have to spend money to hook them up to the system. If they never use a kilowatt hour of energy, let's say the house is never occupied and nobody ever throws the breaker on the house, you still had a cost. You still had to put in a transformer, you still had to do a service drop, you still had to do a meter installation. You still have to read the meter, you still have to send a bill, so on. So there is a sort of a fixed cost associated with having just somebody as a customer. Most residential customer charges amongst municipal utilities range from probably $5 to about $25. Lake Country Co-op, who serves around this area, theirs is over $60, which is higher than your average residential electric bill.
Right.
Now, they have a whole different cost structure and a whole different issue there, but, so one thing is, I think we need to add a customer charge in electric. I oftentimes refer to them as the 3rd rail of electric rate design because nobody likes to have them and nobody likes to increase them. But on a basic sort of fairness and cost basis, they are absolutely justified. Almost everybody has had them forever at some level. And so I think that that's one place that we need to add. Another thing, now, when we look at your energy rates, for residential service, you're charging 8 cents a kilowatt hour. 8 cents is a losing rate, and I'll explain to you why. So far this year, your purchases from Minnesota Power average about 7.5 cents a kilowatt hour. Now, you buy more than you sell because you have some losses. So the average of that is probably more like 7.6 or 7.7 cents per kilowatt hour per kilowatt hour that somebody buys at a home. You're only selling it to them for 8. That's a margin of 0.3 cents. Most municipal utilities need more like 1.5 or 2 cents of margin per kilowatt hour to pay local operating expenses. You know, the bottom line is right now, you're essentially selling at a loss to residential customers. There's not enough margin between the wholesale power cost and the revenue you get from them to pay their share of the local expenses. And when you look at the difference between residential service, which is 8 cents, and commercial service, which is 9.3, so that's a 1.3 cent difference. That's too big of a difference. That the characteristics, particularly of your residential and especially your small commercial, that they're not different enough to warrant that wide of a separation. But because that, you know, just in sort of the basic terms, you can tell that that residential rate is a subsidized rate. Well, it has to be coming from somebody. So that's coming from the commercial. Now, however, the commercial also doesn't have a monthly service charge. They should as well, and it should be higher than the residential monthly service charge. But, you know, so around the electric rates, in particular, my suggestion is that we need to add some monthly service charges. And we need to raise that, you know, and it's not popular with I know everywhere I go, one of the basic things is that, you know, residential rates are the ones we are least excited about raising, you know, because that's the folks. But you know, the residential rate is it's just too low. You probably have the lowest residential electric rates in the state. And if not, you're really, really close. But your cost basis doesn't say it warrants that. So I guess I'm looking for reactions to that I might take into account with whatever I come up with on a recommendation.
We don't want to mirror like,
We won't go, we'll stop well short of $60. When your average bill is only $45 a month for the usage, yes, we won't, at $60 you can get free electricity.
yeah. Well, I would tend to not want to raise it more than we have to, but I don't know what a good estimate on that is.
Well, and if you look at electric on an operating basis, you know, right now we're looking at about a 8% sort of loss this year, growing to about 11%. Now, one of the suggestions I should mention now is that I think what we also probably want to do is attack water and sewer first. One, the need is the greatest, and two, relative to applying for the grant monies, they want your rates to be in decent shape.
Right.
And so one of the other suggestions that I have is that we attack water and sewer in 2019 and wait on electric and refuse until 2020, so that we don't sort of pile it all on the people in sort of everything. And, you know, yes, we're falling a little short in electric, but if we can fix water and sewer right away where the bleeding is on a percentage basis is much more significant, you'll be okay. I mean, maybe we whittle just a little way at your reserve funds, but you don't actually need quite as much in reserves as you probably have. And so luckily, because of your reserve dollars, I think we can phase this in a little bit rather than, you know, sort of hammering them all completely.
Right.
So the increase in electric might be a touch more than if we did it on the 1st of this January, if we waited till the next, but we'll give people another year. So that would be on a timing and sort of from a policy perspective, I have that suggestion as well.
Okay.
Well, instead of going from 8 to 10 in a year or two, I would rather go from 8 to 9 now and kind of bleed it in there instead of slamming the door again.
And that's a potential as well. And I think that what it all, you know, it's sort of all going to come down to now, My suggestion might be though, if you wanted to do phase in, I'd add the customer charge first. And then I'd raise the energy rate later.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because
Is another way that we can look at that.
Right.
The other thing that's nice about customer charges there's a cost basis for them. The other thing is that it's revenue that isn't based on consumption. So if you have a big year of consumption or a lower year of consumption,
It helps to stabilize.
it stabilizes your revenue. Exactly.
And that would be between $5, you said, and,
Yeah, I'm gonna try to do it to be as nice as I can.
good.
I always talk about my 89-year-old mother, who is, I always say, she comes up in every rate case I've ever worked on, because everybody talks about the elderly widow who uses 300 kilowatt hours per month. That is my mom. And so I always keep her in mind when I do rate design, so.
Okay.
Okay,
Well, demographically, I know that we are a lower income community too, so this really does impact.
sure.
I know an added $2.50 a month per our people, it raises like $13,000 a year.
I'd have to, check
Well-
that, sure, okay, I believe that.
Yeah. So I'm just saying if we went to 5, that would be 26. I don't know what 26 would do with your numbers or.
Well, right now, we're showing about a $45,000 loss in electric, so
Right.
and for next year, that would fix about half of it. And then we'd probably have to fix the other half with the energy rate.
So you don't have a recommendation on what to raise the rate?
No, because I'm gonna have that, I'm back up to you next week. I wanted to have this conversation, because, I'm actually already with Lawrence Electric, I'm learning some things relative to what, some of the ideas that you're having on how we might implement this.
Well, I figured out I was using 800 kilowatts, but at 9 cents, that would bring us, our revenues would be $25,000 more, if we went from 8 to 9. And that was at, average of 800, kilowatts. That I thought was closer, but.
What you're talking about for water and sewer though, you're talking
Oh, way more.
way more.
At least on a percentage basis, yes.
So that's gonna be a substantial change for everyone come the first of the year, so I do
Oh,
kinda
yeah.
like your idea of waiting with a couple of the funds before we step up on them.
Let's, we're gonna jump to an easy one, and we're just gonna look at refuse. Pretty straightforward rates, you either have an $11 dumpster or a $16 dumpster, depending upon the size. And, the recycling fee is sort of set relative to as a pass-through from the county. And refuse is not in too bad a shape. We're looking at, probably needing about 8 or 9% to stay level for a couple of years. And I would just do an across the board, kind of increase in refuse just to get, so that the operating results are better. There's no sort of magic to the rates in refuse, because it just depends upon how big a.
When the bill comes to everybody though, all of these things are on the same one bill.
Oh, I understand that.
So,
Well, that's why I also talked about how, sort of that 25% would be about a $28 a month increase in the total bill, because I've seen the bills and I know what they look like.
yeah,
For what it's worth, I pay $100 just for electric, so. I
I
don't use
won't
that
tell
much.
you what
but-
we, yeah. Oh,
Okay, now, so water. Your water rates, your average residential bill per month is $16. That's a bargain.
well, especially when you have the finest water in America.
So on a quality basis, on a sort of dollars per quality gallon, you have the best rate in the world. But we need quite a bit more money in water. By the time, we're looking at about an 85% deficit in water once we hit full debt service on the capital improvements. So, but we need to remember that that's about $14 a month. So I don't want to minimize the fact, but 85% of a small number is better than 85% of a big number.
Right.
So on a percentage basis, it sounds kind of sort of frightening, but relative to water, I got a couple of ideas. One is right now, so you have a $10 base rate, but it includes 100 cubic feet of free water, so to a certain extent, you could argue that you have an $8 base rate, and then it's $2 for 100 cubic feet at 2 cents.
Yeah, because you're not charging for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in fact, if you had an $8 customer charge and no free water, the bill would be pretty much the same, except for the relatively few people who use less than 100 cubic feet.
That would make sense to base rate it and charge your usage.
You're right. Should just had you do this. That's my first suggestion, is not to lower the customer charge, but to remove the free water portion. And basically charge for all consumption on water. Now, if you just did that today, that would basically, for almost all residentials, it would increase their bill by $2 a month. Okay, so that kind of gets us a start. The other thing is that you've got, everybody has a $10 customer charge. The bigger customers, it needs to be more. Most utilities, and I don't think you have necessarily this data, but most utilities will vary their customer charge based on the size of the service. So most residential and very small commercial are, half, 3/4 inch service. But then as you go to 1 and 2 and 3 and 5 and up, on up the ladder, the customer charges get bigger. But I had talked with staff today about the potential of maybe looking at 3 or possibly 4 kind of levels of customer charges based on average consumptions. So you could look back and say, okay, well, last year, if your average consumption was, between 0 and 500 or something, then you're the $10 or whatever the new rate is. And if you're then in another swath, then it's a higher number and a higher number. Because really, when you look back at what the cost basis is around having customer charge, it has to do with what you had to install as a fixed charge to serve the customer. Well, bigger users of water who need a bigger pipe and a bigger service, it was more expensive. So that fixed cost associated with just having them as a customer is higher. So we really need to a certain extent, it's the opposite of electric. In electric, the residential customers deserve a bigger increase. But in water, the commercial customers deserve a bigger increase. I also think that in water, well, the percentage number is so big, the dollar number is not so big. I would do it all at once, because all that sort of doing it in 2 steps does is make it to what still sound like big numbers, delays some of the revenue that you just sort of critically need. And there's a sort of a PR pain associated with doing that, because nobody likes that. And it's kind of like ripping the Band-Aid off and just kind of doing this. The other thing is, and actually Ryan asked me this question earlier today, is how often should you guys kind of have somebody like me look at this? And because he was estimating that maybe it has never been done. And at a utility your size, maybe every 5 years, but other than that, you can kind of decide we need more money, sort of raise rates. What happens though is if you go too long, and you can see that in what has happened in the electric rates, because we're at 8 and 9.3 cents between residential and commercial. Just looking at that, I'm guessing is that a long time ago, those rates were set and there was a small difference. And then every time you raise them both by X%, the difference widens.
Sure.
And so what has happened over time is that every time you do a 3% increase, a 5% increase, a 2% increase, the separation between the 8 and the 9.3 has just grown ever wider, because commercial, obviously the same percentage, it's a bigger number.
Sure.
And that just looks to me, I mean, I've seen that before, and that's likely what has occurred in your electric rates. So, having somebody look at it every now and again is okay, but you certainly don't need to, you can make decisions on your own on an ongoing basis that certainly capable of seeing what you need on a revenue basis.
Yeah, I think the last one we did was in 2013. We looked at the rates and, but,
Who did you have do that, do you remember?
well, it was me and John and, I don't know, there's just us.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, sure.
Yeah.
Good, we haven't gotten, city hasn't paid anybody like this to do it.
No, we've not had a professional
Well,
come in.
problems started coming in when we built a new sewer plant. And nickel and diming people on doing a sewer line and water line here. Now we're looking at doing like Boavic did, and we didn't have this, the sewer plant, we had our own. So all these things came into play after 2013.
Right.
So, yeah, that's why we gave you a call.
Well, I certainly don't have a problem with the fact that you gave me a call.
Okay.
So, basically in water, I think the customer charges need to come up some, but a lot more in commercial than in residential. And we also, the usage charge, we have no choice but to have to raise that as well. That 2-cent usage charge. But, to a certain extent, it's like, even a 50% increase, well, it just goes from 2 to 3. So, again, because it's an awful low number. That 2 cent per cubic foot is a pretty low number. But we'll try to find the right balance, but we're looking at probably about 85% in water to kind of get you where you need to be.
Okay. And we need that to just even apply for this grant, we have to have things in the right order, right?
Yes, I'm not a grant expert, but it certainly makes sense to me that if they're gonna give you some money, they also wanna make sure they're giving it to somebody who has their financial, that you're not taking the grant money and sort of living on it because you're not willing to charge enough in your rates.
Right.
Yeah. And then sewer. Now sewer, you sort of have a couple of things. Again, you have a customer charge that includes 100 cubic feet, and sort of the same recommendation there that we sort of remove the free portion of it. You also have this additional service fee. And regarding the service fee, in particular, for commercial customers, a lot of the commercial customers, their service fee is the same as the residential service fee. But for some of the larger ones, it was set in, what did you say, 2013?
2012.
2012. And it was set based on consumptions the year before, which makes sense. However, we were looking at some numbers where some of those, their consumptions have changed quite a bit since that time. And some of them are down to the point where they're actually probably paying a lot more than they should. And some aren't paying as much as they should. And so that, I agree that we should have the varying service fee, but it should be reset on an annual basis. And basically what I'll do is I'll come up with a formula of sort of on a dollars per, gallons kind of basis. But every year for those customers, we should be looking back and saying, okay, what was your average consumption last year? Because there was one customer in particular, and who had apparently raised this issue, and Diana was showing me his bill, and when you look at his water usage and his sewer usage, but then when you look at that fee, you can tell it's like that fee is way more than it should be.
Right.
So we also think we should fix that on sort of an equity basis, but we won't be looking at, there'll be some moving of those dollars though, because some are also actually underpaying. So one of the ones who's probably underpaying is Kinney.
Yeah, I came up with the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, that's also sort of another kind of issue to be dealt with, but, and around sewer, we don't have to do, well, and obviously your average sewer bills are more than twice as much as the water.
Right.
because average residential is about $36 a month. But see, in sewer, we're probably looking at about 40% in sewer. And again, for sort of the same reasons, I think we should probably look at doing that in one chunk and just sort of fix this. But then what you need to do is, you need to, on an annual basis internally, just make sure, one of the things is that in my over 30 years of doing this at lots and lots of places, is that more small increases always go over better than fewer big ones.
Right.
When you, let's just, I mean, I've worked lots of places where, well, it's been 10 years since we had a rate increase. But now you're doing a really, really big one, and oftentimes in the public's mind, you get no credit for the 10 years of no increases at that point.
No.
Because now you're viewed as mismanaging the system. And all of a sudden you need this huge unfair rate increase, where if you had done a series of 2s and 3s,
We'd still get grief. It doesn't matter.
I understand that, but I've done a lot of public meetings, and let me tell you what, 50% rate increases are tougher than 3s.
I believe that. Have you had to do 50%?
My biggest dollar basis one was a 60% electric rate increase one time in Missouri. I felt like I needed police cover to get out of town.
Yeah, I wondered how many towns ran you out on a rail.
Yeah, I've had some interesting things said about me. Luckily, I don't care. So
Because you get to leave.
yeah, I get to leave as long as I get paid. I'm okay.
So on that sewer on commercial, you would change that base rate for commercial use?
Yes, and again, there should be not only the service fee, because the service fee varies. Well, also the customer base fee should as well. Some of those small commercials should be the same as residential, so I would say I'm gonna have the same recommendation on sewer, is that we have a graduated based on sort of ranges of usage, and we'll figure out what that looks like.
Okay.
I had some of those small ones you're talking about, they were like 1.5, of the average usage. They were, instead of $17, I would charge them $25. Half of the 17. I had them, that's how I had them marked up.
And you probably have a lot of the small commercials who probably don't use any more than residential do, and some probably even less. If you think about if you're just a small office building or a small office with maybe a bathroom in the back,
Right.
you're using less than a house does. So, matching the really small commercial to the resident rate makes sense. But at some point, it doesn't make sense anymore.
Some of those ones you're talking about, I don't think we had them in there as commercial. I think there's a few people, beauty salons, or some of them didn't use just a normal water rate, and we didn't class them as commercials.
Right. Well, and because, see, the only difference is in that service fee, and a lot of your commercials, they're still classified as commercial, but they have the same $17 service fee as the residential. And you might have, if there's some that are buried in the residential, I wouldn't know that. But I do know you have several of the commercials that have the same $17 service fee as residential does.
Yeah.
Because it's actually the ones that are above that, there's just a handful.
I think we had 11.
Yeah, I don't remember on the list, but actually I have the list, I think. Somewhere. But that sounds about right.
Okay.
So any more questions?
No, like I said, the only thing I was going beyond that, electric, I would still do a little bit with that, not come back.
Yeah, so I think what we'll do, what I heard is that we'll look at doing a customer charge first, and then we'll raise the consumption charge in the second phase.
Okay.
Right.
And so what I'll do is, I will have a recommendation. I also then will have both versions of this with the new rates to show you then what happens to the bottom line relative to implementing the new rates. Oh, here's my list of those. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, There's 13 on the list now. All right,
All right.
other questions?
John?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
You bet.
You know, you're talking about this large project and the debt, but when you look at the utilities, water, sewer, electric without the debt, is there a, I know you're talking 85 and 40% increase. Without the projected project, I mean, how much, what they have to raise their...
Well, if you look, yes, so,
I haven't seen your spreadsheet yet, but I was
yeah,
curious.
well, for instance, if we look at 2018, we're basically looking at water about 14% negative as a percentage of revenue, and sewer about 10%. So, but, you know, when you start thinking about $5.6 million on a dollars per person basis in the community, you can see why it's a pretty significant number. Then, you know, even though I'm using, I think that 29-year debt service at an assumed 2.75, I think was in the study, and that's the number that I use. So it's spreading it out over, you know, a long period of time, which actually makes sense because infrastructure is expected to last at least that long. I'm sure your current water pipes have been down there for a
You
long,
don't have
long
the
time.
spreadsheet, John?
No. I'll get one from Brian
sure.
tomorrow. But, you know, one thing we're working on, we got this capital improvement plan where I identified this big 5.6, which is actually down to 5.4, but, you know, but really is that what we want to do? And I think knowing options of, for every $1 million worth of debt or project, how much of the rates have to be increased, but I think help us define our, you know.
This isn't counting any of our grant from federal government that.
Well, you just.
Well, I had $1 million grant in that.
Yeah.
Well, I thought when we were looking there, if you did 6 million, they would do, you know, 40% or 45%.
I haven't got that much in there.
Well, I know, but that's.
Well, it was, you know, the sewer hit that percentage because of the current rates,
Right.
and they base it on
Yeah.
1.4% or whatever of the median household income of the community. But the water was so low, we weren't gonna hit the grant threshold, it didn't seem like.
Right. We had to
Yeah.
adjust the numbers just for the grant because
So
we're
if
not
we-
in line with where we
But if we
need to
did adjust it with Dave here, then we'd be eligible for.
Well, I don't
To
know,
a
I
certain
think that's
amount,
part of
but-
the question is, you know, yeah, we got this project, but are we gonna do it all?
Right,
I think you're
right.
looking for alternatives, like $1 million project, a $2 million project, a $3 million, what would be the,
It's not like the issue is not gonna go away, but it's just, you know,
how
figuring this
fast?
out,
Well, I can look at alternatives if you could give me an indication of what you're thinking of.
Well, I think if we get this, I mean, first of all, it sounds like, what, 10% for sewer and 14 for water,
That just gets you, that's if you do nothing.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
So
there's,
you
I
get
mean,
us
there's all
where we
kinds of
need to
options.
go.
Yeah. What we did was we looked at the entire city, identified all the old infrastructure, water and sewer, basically, we said we're gonna replace it all. So if we're done with that, we'll be done for 50 years maybe. But you know, that's why it's such a big project.
I mean, the other way we could look at this is, we could look at the net project, in other words, whatever the net dollars is out of the city, so whatever the grant happens to be, and whatever you decide to do on a total basis. So, you know, that sort of ranges anywhere from, you know, 0 to the sort of the full 5.8 million. So I could do like you know, well, if it's a $1 million, you know, or 2 million or 3 million, I mean, I could do a couple of scenarios, you know, because sort of our best case scenario right now is about 4.8 million out of pocket for the city. But we can also look at a couple of, you know, half of that and half of that again, lower. And I can calculate recommendations for all of those scenarios if you like.
That would be good.
Yeah, because then we'll have the rates for each one.
Yeah. Yeah, that's no problem.
Thank you, John. That was a good point.
And I also, do you have the ability to have a speakerphone in here? If you want me to at least participate by phone with you again at some point after I send out my recommendation, I'd be happy to do that.
I think we could make something work.
We could
Whether it's,
arrange something if we have to squeeze it.
Even if it's a cell phone with a Bluetooth speaker.
Yeah,
yeah,
sure.
So, now I'm gonna say by the end of next week, I'll have something up which, also takes into account all these various alternatives. And then, there'll basically only be one recommendation for, electric and refuse. But there'll be sort of 3 possibilities then for water and sewer,
Okay,
based on different scenarios relative to capital.
all right.
Okay,
That sounds good.
sure.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
thanks, Dave.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Have a safe trip.
Watch for deer.
Yeah.
Watch out for those cows.
Yeah, I was telling Mr. I did hit a cow a year and a half ago. It was, no, but, it was, actually, the truth is, the woman ahead of me hit it. It was at night. And then I used it as a ramp. And I only hit it with my 2 right wheels, so I put my vehicle on its side.
Oh, jeez.
So then I was sliding down the highway and spinning
Oh,
on my driver's door. And so, yeah, that was fun.
oh boy.
Totaled the car and the cow, but I was fine.
Did you get the beef?
No, but actually a guy who knows about cows said a cow that has been killed that way, the meat's no good.
Oh, really?
Something happens.
Chemical, yeah.
I don't know, they release something, but anyway, it's not good. But I didn't care, I didn't. Didn't want or need the cow.
You had other names for it.
That's right, exactly. All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to JPJ invoice Seville Whiteside. Got the invoice in front of us. This is for the final payment, John?
Well, that's a partial, that was our invoice for the construction management for the Seville Whiteside project.
Right. Okay. Anybody have any questions?
How did this was, the Seville. Did they have trouble on the end or missing some parts, or that hole was open so long?
Were they ready to tie in?
Yeah.
Yeah, they had to get 2, I don't know if it was 245s or whatever to make that final connection. So they didn't have, the way the tie-in was, it matched in very good.
Sure.
So they had to get some valves or some fittings for that.
Any resident complaints yet or no?
I've had one resident complaint that I passed on to John about some fence damage, and I know there was equipment parked in her yard. I have not heard back from utility systems as of now.
Yeah, as far as the fence, I mean, yes, they hit it, but I think they just hit it in the one spot. So, I mean, we're working that. There was an issue of a chain link fence that got damaged. That person sent Ryan a bunch of pictures of it, so. Really, they gotta finish the cleanup in the spring. They didn't, it got late in the year, so.
Glad to see them get it done before any snowballs like last year's project had a lot of complaints just because it got into the snowy season.
Make the motion to approve JPJ's invoice for $11,933.94.
I'll support.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. JPJ estimate number 1, Seville Whiteside.
Yeah, this is for work through October 27th to Utility Systems of America. And that's about 80% of the work. We'll have another pay estimate for the work they completed in early November. They worked on the valve up on he had
State Street.
State Street there, yeah,
Okay.
and some other miscellaneous cleanup things, but this is just partial pay estimate number one.
I make a motion to do, pay estimate number 1.
I'll support that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. All right, thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
Certificate to county auditor. These are special assessments. This one is for France Street Improvement Assessment Resolution 09-40. I have a motion to approve the special assessment.
I'll make the motion to approve the special assessment for resolution 09-40.
I'll support that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. We don't need roll call votes for these are just motions, simple motions, okay. Next is the special assessments for what's this one for? East Monroe Drive.
I'll make a motion.
Support.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Special assessments, this one is for President Avenue and in addition.
Make motion to approve the special assessment resolution 09-41.
I'll support.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Special assessment is for Sharon Street improvements.
I'll make a motion for Sharon Street.
Support.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Another special assessment. This one was for South Memorial Drive. Have a motion to,
Make the motion to approve the special assessment for South Memorial.
I'll support.
any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried.
Are any of these done? This is last. Any of these done?
No. All right, Meds One would like to buy a few of the things from the school. We've got a small list here that they're interested in the air hockey table, foosball table, 2 big cabinets, 14 lockers, 4 big marker boards, ice machine, and the swimming locker room. So,
Basically, Jim had emailed me, he's willing to make the city an offer on it. I would just note that members of the fire department, they're probably gonna use this equipment as well, and it's kind of just sitting up at the school. I mean, I don't really see the city having much use for that, and if it can have a dual purpose with our fire department, I would recommend just letting them have it.
I was gonna say that, we had, the stuff before, when the fire department was, asking all stuff, we just went and got it and we let Ryan know. What we took.
But since the request came from Meds One, I wanted to bring it before the council to see what their thoughts were.
well, if they wanted to buy it, why wouldn't we let them?
Well, if they're gonna buy it, then it would be theirs if they were to do something. But if it was to be transferred from one city facility to the other and remain there, then I think it's doable.
Yeah, and
And they are sharing the building a bit too, so the
But it
liability.
would still be City of Buhl property, so I think that would be the question.
perfect.
Yep. So, do I have a motion to give these things over to, or have
Bring
them
it.
transferred up to the fire hall?
I'll make a motion that we do that.
Support.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Motion to approve liquor license renewal for the Buhl Curling Club.
I'll make a motion that we approve the liquor license for the Buhl Curling Club.
Support.
Any further discussion?
What does it mean by certificate holder? Is that City of Buhl? Does that just mean that their insurance or?
Yeah, the certificate holder, which would be the curling club.
Yeah,
would
and
have-
the license is in their name.
Right. Yeah, it's the curling club, it's not, the city of Buhl isn't getting the liquor license.
Right.
No, but the city still has to approve the.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Usually it's based on that they had real estate taxes, so they're current on that type of thing.
I'll make a motion to approve the liquor license.
It already has been moved and supported. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, motion carried. City employee probationary period.
6 months.
Owen's been around for 6 months, you guys.
He's still here.
Raises.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that he's working out really well. What do you think, Trent? Should we keep him or should we throw him back and try again?
I think we made the right choice of hiring him, and big help.
Every time I see him, he's smiling. So he must be fun to work with.
He's a good guy.
All right. Have a motion to end his probationary period?
I'll make the motion to end Owen's probation period effective as of November 16th. And adjust his pay to the 2180, retroactive to November 16th for the union contract.
I'll support.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Now, of course, our administrative staff up here is non-union, and typically we've mirrored what we do for our union employees so that it's equitable across the board. So,
I'd like to just kind of make a motion to do a similar thing as just like the employees have a 3-year contract. Put our city finance person $24.50 for 2019, $25.50 for 2020, and $26.50 for 2021. And that scale is right in line with everybody else that's getting, you know, the numbers are showing exactly what our city crew is doing and our foreman and our clerk would be the same thing.
you know, but with the city staff here, there's a little more flexibility, and I think we've always done it just annually.
Well,
The one benefit I speak to that, John, is that if we see any movement in staff, then it gives you a little bit of leeway with how you move forward with.
well, it was still, even if, say Diana left after next year, I mean, it was still, it wouldn't do anything.
She's not
I
going
mean,
anywhere.
that number's still gonna be there. And a 3-year thing on Ryan would be $24.50, just like, you know, $1. And then next year would be $1.50, and then $1, back to $1. So in 2021.
He's getting those numbers.
Isn't that more than we gave the?
Yeah, that's more than what we
More
gave the
than we
guys.
gave the city.
Well,
Yeah.
No, not
I think we
actually.
could just take a year at a time here, John. and
well,
go with
all
what they're
I'm doing
looking
is
for.
I'm giving the administrator 50 cents more than the finance person. You know, it's just thrown in there that one time that our clerk and administrator is, and as far as the state points, I mean, the clerk is given more points than a finance person. And it's just a 50-cent bump. I mean, it's not, you know.
All they're asking for is the dollar increase.
Yeah,
For both
well,
of them, and
yeah.
I think that's just fine. I think that's
That's
equitable.
what they're asking for.
Yeah, that's what they're asking for.
I'll make a motion, we approve the dollar increase for finance manager and clerk beginning in 2019.
Sport.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. All right, next is our union contract. I think this just is kind of a foregone, this is just a formality because everything in here we've already approved.
Just have
The only thing I noticed, I came in here today and I was asking, how come the sewer, in the sewer department, our salaries and whatever were a lot? I mean, we don't have a sewer department. Well, it would happen like in 212 or 213 in our contract. Paul retired. We had to spend 4 hours a weekend down at the old septic tank system, and plus the pumps. So in our contract, we ended up with 4 hours on a Saturday and 4 hours on a Sunday, which gave us 6 and 6, 12 hours comp time. It's even written in that, sewer pumps, water pumps. Well, before that, it was 2 hours on a weekend duty, and so you got 3 hours comp time. Well, we don't have a sewer plant anymore, but we're paying our weekend guys for the sewer plant.
I did check with Trent and the guys as far as their weekend duty do check the lift stations. If the council, since this deals with the union contract, if the council wishes for me to get more information or talk to the union, we should table this
Okay.
because it should be discussed in closed session.
Why not, the guys are on call and they come out,
Right.
then that's fine, but that reading of that one line in the contract was just put in there because we didn't have anybody to
Go out and
watch
check
our
it.
pumps.
Yeah.
And we had to go down there and watch the pumps.
Right.
Well, the guys are getting paid for doing that, then we don't have that. I don't know, hopefully Trent and those guys understand that. And, it should have been brought up in 214, 215, but it wasn't.
Right,
It's just rolled in.
yeah,
Or when we were negotiating.
yeah.
Like I said, we should not discuss this in
Right.
open.
Do we want to table this?
Well, it doesn't matter, because we're talking January 1 anyhow, right?
Right, it doesn't kick in for,
Look at it next meeting.
yeah,
Yeah, it should either be, the council should vote on the contract or motion to table it and
look into these.
go back.
Right, go back to the negotiating table on this.
I'll make a motion to table the union contract till the next meeting.
Your support?
I'll support that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Okay, I think we got to the end of this. I have a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried, this meeting's adjourned.